Hey, it's a story study time moment. So, Vedic astrology, we're going to look at Saturn going retrograde and read a report that Vishaka Venkateswara has released today. Today is July 21st, 2026. Saturn is going to go retrograde on the 27th. And side note, we're not talking about this today, but Mercury is going to station direct on the 24th. So we got a little activity going on in the sky, and I think it'll be helpful for us all that are into this kind of thing to understand the nature of what's happening in the cosmos, since they do influence us here on Earth. And hopefully, Vishaka will do a Q&A with us all soon. If not now, when? Okay, let's go. Let's read this report together, huh? So Saturn retrograde in Pisces, returning to complete the karma as time goes backwards. So July 27th, 2026. Can we go back in time and change the future for things that become lessons? This Saturn retrograde time cycle gives us the opportunity to heal the past. So note, please read deeply, as we may not understand what this means in a mundane level, but the soul would completely understand. Okay, so we're going to take it in on a soul level. On July 27th, 2026, Saturn comes to a standstill at approximately 20 degrees 31 of sidereal Pisces and begins its retrograde journey through Revati Nakshatra. Whenever a planet becomes stationary, its energy becomes especially concentrated. It's as though the planet pauses in the heavens so that we can no longer avoid its message. Saturn is the great teacher of time, karma, discipline, responsibility, integrity, and maturity. Saturn shows us where we must develop the inner strength to hold what life has placed before us. It teaches us that certain blessings can only be sustained after we have developed the character, patience, and responsibility required to carry them. When Saturn moves directly, its lessons often manifest through outer circumstances, such as work, responsibilities, delays, commitments, boundaries, and structures of our lives. When Saturn turns retrograde, the classroom moves inward. We are asked to examine the deeper causes behind what is happening around us. Saturn does not physically move backwards. Retrograde is its apparent backward motion as seen from Earth. Symbolically, however, it can feel as though time itself is moving backwards, carrying us into memories, responsibilities, and unfinished chapters that still contain something important for us to recover. Saturn retrograde is not necessarily a punishment or a period of misfortune. Saturn reveals what remains unfinished, unstable, neglected, or disconnected from truth. It returns us to these places because something important still needs to be understood. Sometimes Saturn creates a delay because the foundation is not ready. Sometimes the apparent obstacle is actually protection. And sometimes we're not being denied, we're being prepared. Oh, goodness, Saturn and the many lessons that you bring to life. Okay, Saturn in Pisces now, giving form to the formless. Pisces is the final sign of the zodiac. It represents spirituality. It represents surrender, compassion, intuition, dreams, imagination, oceans, foreign lands, temples, ashrams, isolation, sacrifice, and liberation. It can take us beyond the ordinary boundaries of life and awaken our awareness of the invisible world. Yet, Pisces can also become confused, ungrounded, or overly porous. Its lower expression may appear as escapism, addiction, avoidance, victimhood, unclear boundaries, or the desire to disappear when life becomes overwhelming. Saturn and Pisces have very different natures. Saturn wants order and boundaries, accountability, and tangible results. Pisces wants to dissolve boundaries and surrender to something greater. So Saturn's passage through Pisces, therefore, asks, can our spirituality become something that we actually live? Can our compassion coexist with healthy boundaries? Can our dreams be given practical structure? Can our intuition be supported by discernment? Can we surrender without abandoning our responsibilities? And finally, can we remain sensitive without absorbing everything around us? Saturn in Pisces teaches that genuine surrender is not passivity. Spiritual maturity does not mean waiting for the universe to do everything for us. We must cooperate with grace by creating the conditions through which grace can work. Okay, let's talk about Revati now, the final passage. So Saturn stations retrograde in Revati, the final nakshatra of the zodiac. Revati represents endings, nourishment, protection, guidance, transition, and safe passage from one chapter of existence to another. The deity is Pushna, the divine guide and protector of travelers, animals, and those journeying through unfamiliar territory. I may not be saying the nakshatra right, so please forgive me. Pushan, 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 is also associated with recovering what has been lost and helping us find the correct road when we have wandered away from our path. This is why Saturn retrograde in Revati can bring back something that was lost, forgotten, or left unfinished. It could be a spiritual practice, a relationship, a promise, a vocation, a creative project, a place, teacher, or a forgotten part of ourselves. However, not everything that returns is meant to remain. Sometimes Saturn returns something so that it can be built upon a stronger foundation. At other times, it returns so that we can finally understand it, forgive it, and release it. A second chance does not always mean repeating the past. It means receiving another opportunity to respond to the past with greater consciousness. Okay, so the message of Saturn retrograde in Revati is return, retrieve the wisdom, complete the lesson, and move forward differently. So Revati is ruled by Mercury, making relearning, reconsidering, and revisiting especially important. We may need to correct an earlier decision, change the way we communicate, reorganize our knowledge, or return to a skill we once abandoned. Saturn stations in Revati Pada 2, which falls in Saturn-ruled Capricorn Navamsha. This strengthens the demand for structure, accountability, and consistent effort. Whatever returns cannot be healed through sentiment alone. It must be rebuilt through mature action. So Revati says, surrender. Saturn says, take responsibility. And together, they teach, surrender what you cannot control, take responsibility for what you can, trust divine timing, complete, and release. Are we releasing or are we receiving a second chance? Let's talk about it. What you got to say, Vishaka? Saturn retrograde in Revati can represent both. We may be releasing something because we understood it intellectually but never fully embodied it. Saturn is not satisfied with knowledge that exists only in the mind. It asks us to live what we know. A second chance might involve returning to an unfinished spiritual or creative work, recovering a forgotten talent, reconnecting with a teacher or former collaborator, repairing a promise after learning from earlier mistakes, reconsidering a former home or foreign land, revisiting an education or a training, healing an old relationship pattern, discovering the deeper meaning of a past loss, receiving closure where reconciliation is not appropriate, and transforming an old wound into wisdom that can serve others. The repeating lesson is not proof that we have failed. Sometimes the soul brings us around to the same mountain so that we can see it from a higher place. Saturn asks, what can you do differently now than you could? I'm going to ask this again. Saturn is asking, what can you do differently now that you could not do then? Okay, so when the wound becomes the medicine, let's go. Saturn often places responsibility around the area where we once felt wounded, rejected, delayed, or limited. Over time, the very experience we wish had never happened may become the source of our deepest wisdom. The person who experienced loneliness may learn how to accompany others. The person who struggled with health may become a healer. The person whose voice was silenced may become a teacher. The person who lost direction may become a guide. The person who experienced instability may learn how to build lasting foundations. We pray. I added that, we pray. He didn't write that. So this is one of Saturn's deepest mysteries. The hidden gift eventually becomes a responsibility. What we have learned through difficulty may become part of what we are meant to offer to the world. In this way, the wound becomes medicine and karma becomes dharma. The retrograde, reviewing unfinished karma. During Saturn retrograde, old responsibilities, fears, relationships, or commitments may return. We may question decisions that once appeared certain. Progress may seem slower, but the slowing down has a purpose. Saturn wants us to examine the foundations before continuing to build. This period can reveal responsibilities we've postponed, boundaries that need to be restored, promises that must be honored or consciously released, spiritual practices returning greater consistency. Spiritual practices requiring greater consistency. Work needing revision rather than abandonment. Emotional burdens we've carried for too long. Patterns of guilt, fear, isolation, or self-judgment. Places where compassion became unhealthy, self-sacrifice. Dreams requiring discipline before they can manifest. And chapters needing conscious closure. That's a lot, y'all. These things may come up for you, and it's okay. That's what I wish to say at this point in this report. It is okay. If you can acknowledge it and be honest about it and accept it, then you can move with greater awareness through these things. But let's carry on. Let's see what else he has to say. Saturn retrograde may awaken the fear that we're behind in life. Yet Saturn is the Lord of time. It reminds us that our lives cannot be measured by external speed. The better question is not merely, why is this taking so long? The deeper question is, what is time trying to teach me? Okay, now let's talk about, he's got Jupiter, protective grace. At the moment Saturn turns retrograde, Jupiter is powerfully exalted in Cancer in Pushya Nakshatra. From Cancer, Jupiter casts a special ninth aspect toward Saturn in Pisces. Hallelujah. This is one of the most encouraging features of the chart. Saturn represents karma, necessity, and effort, and Jupiter represents wisdom, faith, grace, and higher guidance. Jupiter's influence does not remove Saturn's lessons, but it can help us recognize their meaning. So difficult realizations can ultimately become blessings. Teachers, counselors, spiritual communities, family support, or inner wisdom may help us navigate what initially feels heavy. I'm going to interject and say something here, my thoughts. So I encourage you not to isolate yourself. Don't isolate yourself. Okay, I'm going to carry on with the reading now. The retrograde can become a period of spiritual reconstruction rather than emotional defeat. Jupiter in Pushya reminds us that real growth requires nourishment. Discipline must not become cruelty towards ourself. I'm going to repeat that. Discipline must not become cruelty towards ourselves. We can accept responsibility while remaining compassionate. That is so important. Be kind to yourself. Okay, grace does not always remove the lesson. Sometimes grace helps us receive the lesson without being destroyed by it. Take that in. All right, now Mars under Saturn's gaze. Let's talk about it. At the stationary moment, so when Saturn stations on the 27th, Mars is in Taurus and receives Saturn's special third aspect. This can produce tension between the desire to act and the necessity of waiting. So Mars is going to be like, move, and Saturn's going to say, be certain. This can create frustration, impatience, or the feeling that progress is being obstructed. Suppressed anger might rise to the surface. People may try to force results only to discover that greater pressure creates greater resistance. This is so important, you guys. Okay, the remedy. It's not complete inactivity. It's disciplined action. Slow, deliberate effort will be more effective than impulsive decisions. So, Saturn's influence upon Mars asks us to conserve our energy and direct it toward what genuinely matters. Okay, now let's talk about the moon. The moon's in Mula at this time. Mula, the root. So returning to the root. So the moon is in Mula Nakshatra at the time Saturn stations, and it receives Saturn's special 10th aspect. So Mula means the root, like I just mentioned. Its energy pulls beneath appearance and asks us to discover the original cause of condition. The emotional atmosphere may therefore feel intense and introspective. We may realize that the external problem we have been trying to solve originates from a deeper belief, fear, attachment, trauma, or ancestral pattern. This is a lot, y'all, okay? So please take it easy as this retrograde happens later on. I think it's Saturday. Whew. Okay, so Mula uproots what is false so that something more authentic can grow. Combined with Saturn retrograde, this can support therapy, meditation, ancestral healing, shadow work, and honest self-examination. The purpose is not to remain trapped in the past, it's to find the root so that we no longer need to keep producing the same fruit. All right, the cosmic downloads, here we go. Woo, Saturn retrograde through the 12 houses. I don't know if I'm going to read this, y'all, because this is already pretty lengthy. I will just guide you to his Facebook page, Peter Vishaka Venkateswara. You can find him on Facebook. This report is on his page. He's going through all the 12 houses, like where Saturn is going to fall in these 12 houses, and I encourage you to read it. And then, as I mentioned, there is an intended plan for he and I. I'm just going to host it, and he's going to show up in the hot seat and take our questions and answers, so you can see exactly, what's going on for you and how this is all falling in your chart. And by the way, I would recommend an astrology reading with Vishaka. Of course, I'm available for readings, but honestly, I recommend reaching out to him right now and getting familiar, or just come to the Q&A, come to the Q&A and ask your questions, or just listen. I'll share a link on my Instagram and Facebook. Yeah, so I'm going to skip over the 12 signs. You can read that yourself, and I'm going to go down to this part, like who may feel this most strongly, like who's going to feel this retrograde. Okay, this retrograde may be the retrograde may be specifically significant for people who have important Saturn, important planets. So the ascendant or moon in Pisces, particularly near Saturn's stationary degree in Revati, It may also be strongly experienced by people undergoing a Saturn Mahadasha, or Antardasha, a Saturn return, Sarasati, or another significant Saturn activation. So look, check it out. If you are going through any of those periods and you know it, come to the Q&A. Okay, people with important placements in Taurus might really feel this. Virgo or Sagittarius, they may also experience Saturn's special aspects more directly. Yet Saturn does not affect everyone exactly the same. Much depends on the house Saturn rules, its conjunction in the natal chart, and the planetary period operating in the individual's life. Yeah, there's so many layers and codes when it comes to the astrology chart and your unique makeup, your, unique, one-of-a-kind, special makeup, and where all this lands for you. So here's some questions for Saturn retrograde, some things that you can take to heart during this time. So, what unfinished responsibility continues to drain my energy? Where do I need clearer boundaries? Am I suffering or avoiding? Oh, no. Am I surrendering or avoiding? And if you're avoiding, you're probably suffering. Which dream now requires a practical plan? What must be completed before I move forward? Where have I mistaken guilt for responsibility? Which spiritual truth must become part of my daily life? What am I ready to forgive without repeating? And which commitments still belong to my future? 2 more questions. What has time been patiently trying to teach me? And finally, what wisdom have I gained that I am now responsible for sharing? So let's talk about some remedies. Let's see. And then he's got a prayer, a gift. Okay. So it's not that much more left. I hope you find this beneficial, or else you wouldn't have hung out this long. We love remedies, right? I believe anything can be remedied. Where there's life, there's hope. Here we go. The greatest remedy for Saturn is not fear, it's right action. Saturn responds to humility, discipline, patience, simplicity, honesty, and service. So help the elderly, help the poor, disabled, lonely, or chronically ill. That's great karma yoga. Saturn loves it. Respect workers and those who contribute, whose contributions often go unnoticed. Fulfill promises. Repair what's been neglected and gradually pay what is owed. So helpful Saturn remedies also include maintaining a regular sleeping and eating times, creating a simple and sustainable daily routine, completing one unfinished responsibility at a time, walking, stretching, practicing gentle, consistent movement is really good, performing karma yoga, that's selfless service, without seeking any recognition, donating food, blankets, shoes, or practical necessities, donating black sesame on Saturdays, feeding crows where this can be done safely and respectfully, practicing silence, meditation, and self-observation, simplifying possessions and unnecessary commitments, burning frankincense during prayer or meditation, offering water to Shiva, reciting Om Shram Shanicharya Namaha. Keeping healthy emotional and financial boundaries, avoiding dishonesty, exploitation, and promises we cannot fulfill. And finally, resting when rest is needed without turning rest into avoidance. So Saturn does not require an elaborate performance. A small act of service performed consistently carries more Saturnian power than a dramatic ritual performed only once. So let's go into this. Great. Thank you for those remedies. Let's go into the prayer for Saturn retrograde specifically. Lord Shiva, help me hold what is difficult without being consumed by it. May all poison become wisdom. May all fears become stillness. May all karma be purified by grace. Help me surrender what I cannot control and take responsibility for what I can. Guide me safely through the unfinished passages of my life. May I recover the wisdom that has been lost, complete what my soul came here to complete, and release what no longer belongs to my path. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. And lastly, the gift of Saturn retrograde. So Saturn retrograde does not take us to fear the future, or it doesn't ask us to fear the future. It asks us to become ready for it. There are times when life slows down because the soul is retrieving a piece of wisdom that the personality left behind. Sometimes we may need to be forgiven, completed. Oh, not sometimes. Something may need to be forgiven, completed, reorganized, or understood before the next doorway can open. In Revati, Saturn returns us to the final pages of an old chapter. We may discover that closure does not always come from receiving the answers we wanted. Sometimes closure comes from becoming strong enough to stop asking the past to be different. Saturn in Revati reminds us that we are being guided through a passage. We may not yet see the destination, but we can still walk with integrity. We can surrender without giving up. We can rest without escaping, and we can trust divine timing without abandoning our responsibilities. Boy. What returns during Saturn retrograde may not be returning to remain. It may be returning so that it can finally be healed, understood, or completed. Surrender what you cannot control. Trust divine timing. Complete and release, and allow karma to become dharma, and allow the wound to become medicine. That's it. So thank you, Peter Vishaka, for that report. And if you hung out with me this long in this reading, thank you, bless you. Remember, say your prayers, honor your father and mother. And remember, there's something miraculous here. If you're living and breathing and being, you can bet there's something miraculous here. So from my heart to yours, I'm sending you so much love and a big smile. I wish you well on this journey of being human.